So we're going to welcome everyone to our inaugural episode of the Canadian Patriot Podcast, recording today on October 26, 2015. And joining me this evening we have Jeff, a married father of one, working as a skilled trade in the construction industry. He's been an avid firearms enthusiast for the last 5 years. He enjoys competing in IPSC, ORA, 3-gun, and Cowboy Action Shooting. Jeff is on the board of directors at his gun club. A man that needs no introduction, but we'll get one anyway, Shawn Bevins. He's been very active in the firearms community and is a freedom-loving lobbyist and political activist. And Tyler, the co-founder and co-host of the International Liberty or Death podcast, which is now entering its 3rd year. Tyler is 27 and has been shooting for 9 years, both as a casual and sport shooter and hunter. He identifies politically as a libertarian. I'll be your moderator this evening. My name is Andrew. I'm an instructor, gear reviewer, competitive shooter, and director at my gun club. We'd love to hear your feedback about the show. Please visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback or email us at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. We'd also like to thank our 6 YouTube visitors for being with us this evening. How is everyone? I know we've already done the pre-show, but Shawn, how are you? How are things?
I'm just fantastic. I've swallowed all the razor blades that I can swallow. I've broke every rope in my home trying to hang myself. I think I've gotten past the initial shock of a Trudeau government.
I'm glad you're still with us.
I'm indeed still with us, yeah.
Jeff, how are things with you?
Oh, I'm in the same boat as Shawn, unfortunately. I just keep on walking around the streets, looking at people's faces, thinking, were you the dummy that voted for Trudeau as well? And I just, I've given up on my fellow man.
My liver is still recovering from the events of October 19th. There wasn't enough beer in the house to handle the events as they unfolded. You know, I'm happy to say, though, that my riding went conservative, and every riding that my riding touches went conservative. So I'm surrounded by good people.
Well, I guess it's the same for me. I was surprised. I was actually shocked that I was certain that the Conservative would be elected here, or at worst, I suppose, a Liberal. But no, NDP again. Yeah, they voted NDP this riding.
By how much of a margin?
Oh, huge. It wasn't even close.
No, that's too bad.
Yeah, that is unfortunate.
I'm surrounded by communists.
I would like to take the opportunity just to thank you, Andrew, for putting this together. I'm excited about doing this show, and especially for you going to the effort to reach out to me in the farthest flung outer fringes of the Canadian gun community. So I'm happy to be a part of the panel.
Well, I'm actually really glad you could all make it tonight, even you, Tyler. Because actually, that'll be the main topic of the show this evening: is how do we unite that community? And like you said, you're part of the far-flung reaches. I'm more of the black rifle shooter, restricted shooter myself. Shawn, I know he's very active with the political side of things. Jeff just likes guns. I think he has all of the guns.
Not all of them, and don't let my wife hear that.
Fair enough, sir. If you guys are okay, we'll dive into the news. The story that I'd like to cover this evening is the CBC report covering the CBC report on converting semi-automatics into fully automatic firearms, which was published on the 23rd of October 2015. Title was RCMP Tests Show Some Firearms Can Be Converted to Fully Automatic, and I'll be putting a link to that in the show notes. It is, of course, on cbc.ca. Now, everyone had a chance to read the article. I'm sure everybody watched the 90 seconds of terrible news coverage. The couple of things that immediately jumped out at me that I'd like to talk about was the many semi-automatic rifles are susceptible to improvised deadly upgrades, which was the subtitle of the article. And I'm immediately baffled, and I haven't even started the first paragraph, because what kind of a deadly upgrade is fully automatic? It's the same gun it was a minute ago.
If anything, it makes the gun less lethal.
Right? Like, I've shot full auto. Has everyone else shot full auto?
Yeah, I have.
I have not. I have had a malfunctioning disconnector on an AR before, which is a similar experience. But only with a 5-round magazine, so maybe not.
Yeah. Still not something you're planning for, I'd imagine. Yeah, you're right, though. Fully automatic firearms are not exactly the world's most easy to control implement. They're
well, I mean, really, at the end of the day, I mean, we would all want it and have it just to have it.
Oh, absolutely. As a toy, as something to have, I think.
But I mean, who could afford to feed one? Like, really? Like, let's be totally honest about it. I mean, you have to have really deep pockets to run consistently full auto with 30 rounds. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. There might be one occasion a year where I have to clean out my girlfriend's barn at her family farm of raccoons, where I might actually have a need for full auto.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's a constructive use for full auto. I like it. I hadn't considered that. I mean, aside from suppressive fire, I didn't really... I guess raccoon control is a valid option.
Well, YouTube is rife with videos of full auto against pop bottles and fun targets like that. I mean, you can watch that and not say it looks like a ton of fun.
And it is a ton of fun. But as a deadly upgrade to a rifle, I hardly think that that's a valid subtitle for this article. Just
no, absolutely not.
It's the same ammunition. The cyclic rate went up. So, I mean, you're going to run out of bullets faster, I guess?
It's the CBC creating another phantom boogeyman that softens people up for the next round of gun control legislation. That's all it is.
Yeah.
If you read the article, it says that this killer, Justin Bork, told the RCMP that he had considered making his semi-automatic rifle into a prohibited full auto. So he didn't even go ahead with doing that. He considered it, and that was enough to send the RCMP off on their little tangent looking into this. And that's what this whole article is really about, is a confessed killer saying he had once thought about doing something. So that's just insane that a media outlet like the CBC would go forward with a news article that's so misinformed and so deliberately deceptive. Wow.
Well, it is. It is deliberately deceptive, and I think that's part of the unfortunate agenda of our mainstream media in this country is to paint guns and gun owners in this light where we're bad based on the way that it sounds. Like they're twisting the language to make it sound like something it's not.
Well, you keep in mind. I mean, look at Thomas Mulcair or Justin Trudeau when they talked about C-42 and the transporting of firearms and all the rest of it. These people, they don't. And I said this in one of my videos the other day about when I did the whole 12-gauge semi-automatic shotgun with the AR-15. They don't differentiate. When you say semi-automatic to them, their brains hear automatic. Their mind thinks, these are machine guns. That's where their mind. When you try to explain to them a semi-automatic is, one pull of the trigger, one round is discharged down range. But they don't get that, right? It's not part of their messaging. It's not part of their narrative. Their narrative is to fearmonger. There's a great document actually, and I'm sure some of you folks have seen it. It's the anti-gun lobby's book of effective messaging. Have you guys seen this document that they?
Yeah, I've seen that.
I've seen that. Yeah.
It's if you look at these, if you look at these CBC articles, it was almost like it was written by Heidi Rajan or Wendy Kupier. I mean, this is what they do. They're all kind of using the same effective messaging, right? It's all about fear. They want to fear the unknowing population, and we saw that in, I believe, Rod Giltaka did a Man on the Street video where he starts to talk to people, and I mean they're totally oblivious to our reality and the firearms that we peacefully enjoy. And for them, if you say, do you know what a semi-automatic is? Well, they're going to say to you right away, that's a machine gun.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Certainly, if it looks the part. A lot of people might turn a blind eye when they see an SKS because it has a wood stock, but as soon as they see something in a synthetic stock like a Mini 14 in a Sparta stock or something like that, now all of a sudden it's an evil baby-killing assault weapon, even though it's functionally identical.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. They're totally twisting the language to control the narrative, even to use the term assault rifle, assault weapon. Assault is an action. It's an inanimate object. It can't perform that sort of right out of the gate, the language is already being used against the community and the individual firearm.
Well,
that term.
That whole assault rifle weapon thing came from the National Firearms Act down in the States when anti-gun senators basically crafted with the anti-gun lobby effective messaging. It was a simple, we all know AR stands for Armalite rifle. It doesn't stand for an assault rifle. But there was an easy association, right? It's like you said, it's controlling the narrative, and it's a brand for them, right? Like that's their vessel in which they vehicle their anti-gun agenda. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know if you guys noticed, but when we had that Parliament Hill shooting, with all the media surrounding that, I noticed there was a distinct lack of talk about the weapon used, and that's because he used a hunting rifle.
Yeah, he
and
used an old
forbid, yeah, God forbid he had used an AR or an SKS.
Sorry, on that topic, I saw a wonderful post on the Coalition for Gun Control website, guncontrol.ca. Wendy Sukier, or one of her minions, says that the Parliament Hill shooter used, I'm doing air quotes for the audio version, an old duck gun. It's a Winchester 30-30. There's no way you can confuse that as an old duck gun if you knew the first thing about firearms.
Respect to the guy that's blowing ducks out of the sky with a 30-30, though.
Valid point. Yeah, valid point.
Well, you guys do know, in fact, though, that the Browning machine gun was based off of a lever action that John Browning had actually converted way back in 1892.
Oh, don't tell anyone that. They'll start banning all the lever guns.
I know that the great John Moses Browning basically proved that essentially any firearms design could be adapted to fire in a fully automatic fashion with the right tools and knowledge at your disposal.
Absolutely.
It's just a question of time, knowledge and money, really. And that's what the RCMP does at their, like lab of black magic, with all, the bottomless pit of taxpayer dollars and all the time in the world to make, whatever method they can MacGyver up to make an SKS go full auto, and then they can crank up the fear machine.
Well, I have to agree to disagree, because I don't give them that much credit. I know Bill Etter. And I'm not going to say anything bad about the guy. He's an ammunition collector. I find it ironic that he's at the. Strangely enough, he's an ammunition collector and a very adamant. He's got probably one of the best ammunition collections in the world, and he's religiously at the gun shows in Montreal. Look, I read through the access to information documents with regards to the CZ rifle, and they based their assessment off of obscure technical drawings that were supplied by Swiss Arms, when Swiss Arms had this receiver thing, and it's a really, really obscure document that basically they based their opinion off of that. I mean, this might seem outrageous, but during the C-68 hearings, when they went through and they reclassified a whole bunch of firearms, you know how they did that?
I was told that they flipped through a magazine and picked out the scary ones.
Yeah, absolutely. They did it with a guns and ammo magazine, and so that's the outrageousness of these bureaucrats that are supposedly experts in the field. I don't believe that they have this clandestine workshop, machine shop, where they're actively trying to technically modify firearms, machining parts and receivers and doing heavy mods. That the average person, heavy mods that the average person can obviously not achieve. I don't think they're doing that, but I think they're watching YouTube videos on how to bump fire, any semi-automatic firearm. That I do believe.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. This is like the great libertarian dilemma, where on the one hand you maintain that government is incompetent, and then on the other you maintain that they're engaged in these grandiose schemes to deprive you of your liberties and freedoms. You can't really have it both ways.
Yeah, I don't know if they're. I don't know, to be quite honest with you, if they're that smart.
I've always wondered what goes on there, and whether they have policy meetings or agenda meetings and what's actually discussed. But when they're dropping comments like, many semi-automatic rifles are susceptible to improvised deadly upgrades, and we have demonstrated that there are some weapons that are susceptible to being fired in full automatic mode. Mid-range caliber weapons based on military or paramilitary design are more susceptible to this technique. Things of that nature. I mean, it seems clear that there is an overarching policy directive here guiding what kind of narrative they're delivering to the media, which then gets distributed to the population.
Well, like I said, I read very, very carefully like I say, the access to information requests, and you don't get, you can see there that there's clearly an agenda. Okay, like you can just in the language that they use when they're describing certain functionalities or describing a certain firearm, or there's clearly an agenda there. I'm not sure. To be quite honest with you, I don't know if those types of, I like to call them entry-level bureaucrats. I'm not sure that those entry-level bureaucrats are really up to speed on the overall agenda of civil disarmament, right? I think that I think they've got people that certainly will go through, the lab docs or the, and reword and rewrite and re-edit and edit and edit. Until they get the that perfect tone that they can present to the minister, because obviously these documents they get forwarded up the chain up to the minister for a ministerial brief, is what they call it. But I don't try to give too much credit to the ones that are kind of at the bottom of the totem pole. I think that the ideological forces behind that are certainly, there are certainly ideological forces in the RCMP upper echelons for sure. And they've got an axe to grind. Look, the police chiefs were called liars by Candace Bergen in front of the Senate. The Mayor Thorpe, like all these tragedies with regards to RCMP officers that have been gunned down by these totally insane people. I mean, there's the upper brass has an axe to grind, and they're going to grind it. Right, for sure. and they'll use those lower level bureaucrats to help pave the way.
And now they have a government that's friendly to their ways.
Yeah, certainly a government that's not going to stand up and call them liars.
No.
That's really the true. What's really upsetting about it all is that when you've got these really, at the end of the day, you in a free and democratic country with the values that we would like to collectively hold dear to our hearts as Canadians, to know that a police officer will actually be making law, like that's pretty scary stuff. And not to say that there's some Dr. Evil, pulling the levers in the background, but nonetheless, in an open society such as ours, it's up to the elected politicians to be the lawmakers and not necessarily the police, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely, it should be a division of power between the two. The police
that's why
enforce the law.
That was what's so shocking about the CZ, VZ, and Swiss Arms fiasco is they turned, 16,000 people overnight into people that were, and they had no way legally, after the abolishment of C-19, they had no way of reaching out to the people that had these firearms to let them know that they were now in possession of a prohibited firearm. I mean, that's
it almost seems convenient that they waited until after C-19 to be able to do that, to not be forced into notifying those individuals.
Oh, there's that. It also gives them the opportunity to go in front of the media and say that all these, allegedly dangerous rifles are out on the streets, and we have no way of knowing where they are. Thanks, conservatives.
You hit the nail right on the head.
But if they were serious about it, why wouldn't they just send a document to every legal PAL holder that if you own this particular rifle, it is now prohibited? I mean, that would be the simple solution.
Well, that is the simple solution. Why would they do that?
But I you know what? Legally, under C-19, I'd have to look at the wording. I don't think they can do that.
Oh.
They can't. No, like I said, I don't have C-19 in front of me to read the specific language of it. But I don't think, I may be wrong. If somebody's out there listening on YouTube that can correct me, if I am wrong, please do. But I don't think that they can legally do that. Now, one thing that I truly found, totally outrageous. I said this right straight to Minister Blaney. I said it right to his face. the RCMP have an agenda that was not conducive with the conservative government. That whole thing with the chiefs of police, with I don't know if you guys have watched that video where she basically tells them that they were liars. Like, these people have they've got an elephant memory, and I mean, they played the card. What they're trying to do is they're trying to separate what they were trying to do with the CZ, VZ. They wanted to separate the conservatives and distance them from the firearms community. They wanted to drive a wedge in between, and that's exactly what it did. I heard rumors that conservative members of parliament received upwards of 120,000 pieces of mail during that reclassification. So, you know,
that's a massive volume of voter input.
Yep. Well, you know, but we were fortunate enough to have a government that would, you know, well, first and foremost, whether you agree with Stephen Harper and the Conservative Party or you don't, I think we can all simply agree on the fact that when Stephen Harper said he was going to do something, he did it. And when he said he was going to follow through with something, he would do that. They said that they were going to fix the CZ and Swiss Arms, and they did, right?
Yep, I still have mine.
Yep. Too little, too late. I don't know. You know, did a bunch of people stay home because of that? I don't know. I didn't get to look at the really.
I mean, I went out and voted. I did for a time withdraw my financial support due to, for one, my particular MP giving me the cold shoulder. But just the fact that it took, well, it was like 523 days, I believe, from the initial reclassification to the eventual solution being passed in Parliament. You know, to fix what is essentially, you know, a clerical change. I realize that there are hoops and hurdles and stuff, but the fact that it took them even until July to fix something that they should have had prepared while they were in the opposition, really. You know, we all know that C-68 was a recognized problem, whether it was the Conservative Party of Canada or any of the parties in its lineage that came before it. They all knew it was a problem, and it always shocked and amazed me that they never had legislation just waiting in the sidelines to put in when they were finally in power. So it was tremendously disappointing that it took so long to, you know, essentially give us a Band-Aid for a sucking chest wound. After we had been warning them, they were warned about the reclassification of the Swiss Arms. I warned them 6 months before it happened, and our warnings went unheeded. And then it happened, and then it still took them a year and a half to give us just to give us our rifles back, you know, full use and privileges of, you know, something we had enjoyed up to prior, you know, the end of February 2013, was it 2014? I don't even remember now. It was so long ago. But that was tremendously disappointing. But I will, of course, Shawn, yeah, no other party would have done what they did for us. That's obvious.
Well, but you know, look, at the end of the day, I mean, I you know, discussing with Minister Blaney during that whole period, you know, he told me, he openly admitted to me that he didn't know anything about the Firearms Act. He didn't know anything about the gun laws. He didn't know anything about the Firearms Act. He was relying on the information from the bureaucrats. Now, the bureaucrats are the real problem, okay? Not the staffers or the senior appointees, because those are obviously political appointees, but I'm talking about the bureaucrats, the people that are in charge of crafting language. I know only because I was, you know, somewhat involved in C-42, the back and forth of, you know, what the minister wanted, what the Prime Minister, the PMO's office wanted in terms of legislation, what they wanted to look like, and then to get that to the bureaucrats. I mean, we saw that with, a perfect example is exactly that, you know, when the minister came out with this, you know, this supposed amnesty, allowing people to use their firearms, and then you've got the Ontario CFO and the Quebec CFO that come out and say, well, there are no ranges approved under Section 29 for prohibited firearms, right? So it just goes to show that, like, even in the upper echelons of the public safety minister's office itself, I think that the laws are so horrible, and depending on which school of thought you're from. You know, some people would say that they were a brilliantly crafted set of laws, and they were designed in the sense that they were to facilitate the disarmament of people. On the other hand, you've got so outrageously obnoxious in terms of legislation and what it does to law-abiding people that so complex that, I mean, even people that are responsible for crafting the legislation are lost, and it's just sheer labyrinth of confusion. It is not, look here real quick. I mean, it is by no means a simple set of laws. I mean, look at that. This is what they call the Annotated Firearms Act. If you don't have it, you need to get it. But I mean, it's I don't know.
What is that? 3 inches thick?
Yes, it's 1,000 pages. And there is no other such law in Canada that's so complex. Now, in 2002 there was a report done by the Privacy Commissioner, and they found many breaches of constitutional law in terms of our constitutional privacy rights that are being actively breached by the Firearms Act, and nothing's been done about it. Those reports have been out there since, for the last 13 years, and literally nothing's been done to address them. So, and what we've done now, argue with C-42, I mean, yes, the Conservatives did, but hey, it's a political game for them, right? It's a carrot. So long as they can keep us baited, and I hate to say that, but I mean, really, anybody that's relatively intelligent would recognize that is, so long as they can keep us baited, with this whole firearms issue and give us, incremental pieces and stuff back, they'll keep us, voting for them, right? I mean, that's,
that is the reality of it. Yeah, exactly. That is the reality of it, and the Conservative Party knows that. The last thing that I want to touch on with this article, and we'll get everybody's final thoughts on it, was Stephen Blaney having the only intelligent quote in the entire article, saying that altering a firearm for fully automatic fire is illegal in Canada, and violators would be subject to lengthy prison sentences of up to 10 years. And that's the only part in the article that is actually a set of facts.
Yeah, you're right, Andrew. Yeah, the article is devoid of any other intelligence.
Well, it is. It's rampant speculation and fear-mongering.
Mm-hmm.
I think it speaks to the, again, I think it helps them with their, the mean conservatives throwing people in prison for 10 years. Like, there's a tone to that, right?
Even when the conservatives are seemingly level-headed and grounded, they're still being presented in, exactly the way you say it. They're being presented as heavy-handed, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, when you say that, but will anybody out there that's reading this in downtown Toronto, is anybody going to take the time to actually realize that 10-year sentence was from Liberal legislation?
No, and of course they'll never see it that way. I think the other supplementary part of that quote is that he described the law as sufficiently robust, and it's true. There's already a law against killing somebody. What difference does it make really if somebody's blowing up some cardboard or paper or tannerite at their range, whether it's full auto or semi-auto or bolt action? Who cares? I mean, that's the way I see it. I'm sure everybody on this panel sees it that way too.
Oh, absolutely. I totally 100% agree with you. I mean, murder is illegal, and if the the idea of crime and punishment, and life and 25 years behind bars was a deterrent, we wouldn't have murders. It just goes to prove, the utter futility of some of these. I mean, it may sound beyond the realm of, murderers need to be punished, obviously. But do they do anything to stop from killing each other? I'm not completely convinced.
No, I have always said that laws do not keep you safe. They only codify what an offense is and what the punishment might be. The only thing a law does is it motivates the criminal to commit his crime in such a way that he believes he won't get caught. And if the criminal commits his crime in a way that he believes he won't get caught, then the punishment is not a deterrent.
Yep, fair statement.
Yeah, well said.
That is very well said. And I think with that, we'll close out the news. If no one has anything else.
No.
And we'll move into the main topic of the show, which is a frightening and scary subject for everyone on the panel, and I'm sure all of the listeners. how do we unite all of the Canadian gun owners so that we're all on the same page now that we're no longer tolerated by the Conservative Party?
Well, let me ask you something. Who on this panel owns at least one handgun and at least one black rifle? I do.
I do.
Yeah, I do.
I do as well. And
I'd say all of us fall in the same category of gun owner if you were to ask somebody who just, shoots around a skeeter trap once a week or goes out duck hunting every fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the issue is we have such a prosperous firearms community where there are so many options with firearms and recreational use of firearms and what we can do with them. You can hunt multiple things. You can shoot multiple sports. You can be involved in them just as strictly as a military collector or a historical collector. You can enjoy them from an engineering perspective. Firearms are a broad and interesting topic, which I think plays as a double-edged sword within our community, because we have people that are that duck hunter that goes out once every year and gets his bag limit for the day, and that's his entire involvement with firearms, and his duck gun is nothing more than a tool the same way his bow or his dog is. At the same time, you have people that are handgun owners or black rifle owners that want to use them to compete and target shoot. Or we have people that want to do Cowboy Action or IPSC. Or we have people that want to do bench press shooting or F-class with what would be non-restricted rifles, but it's still competitive shooting. Unfortunately, it's a very broad community. I think that works against us in some respects.
Well, I don't think we can be totally defeatist here. I'm actually quite encouraged. Dan Fritter from Caliber Magazine produced a wonderful demographic, a mini kind of a demographic presentation of the Canadian firearms industry and different areas of growth. And to the anti-gun agenda detriment, our biggest ally, folks, is modern warfare. It's Sony PlayStation, it's airsoft, it's paintball, and you've got a bunch of liberal parents who have kids that are hardcore gamers. Look, both of my boys are gamers. They've got their YouTube channel. They've got these intro videos that they do. They do these tricks and backflips and all kinds of trick shots. And for these kids, you got to remember, some of these kids have exposed themselves to thousands of hours of play with an AR-15. And you talk to these kids, and I mean, my boys, they've got friends that come over. Their parents are not pro-gun by any stretch of the imagination, and I've brought them to the range, and they just fall in love immediately. That's the AR-15. That's the M4. They think it's an M4. That's the M4 that I shoot with in Modern Warfare or what I mean, some of these other games. So I think to the detriment of the anti-gun lobby, I think that there's a growing, very strong gamer community out there that will eventually naturally transition towards real firearms ownership. Okay?
I can second that. In my experience, I don't have enough digits on my hands and feet to count the number of times I've handed my AR to somebody on the range, somebody younger than me, and they look through my EOTech site and say, "Whoa, just like Call of Duty."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, these kids are, like I say, and this has been to the detriment of the gun grabbers, is that you've got these kids, my kids don't read Guns and Ammo magazine, but they can tell you every single firearm, black rifle, optic, you name it, because of the video games, because they play these video games where they have access to this unlimited arsenal of firearms that you can basically they know all of the firearms, right? So I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged that community. I'd rather them be out there shooting and practicing firearms sports rather than have them plugged in behind a computer screen or a television screen. But I'm encouraged by that, and I think that we have an aging population that these guys, and let's keep in mind, guys, there was a study done in 2002 by StatsCan, and they found that 30% of Canadian homes own firearms. Okay? Now, you do the math. There's only 2 million of them on the books. 30% of the Canadian population, or 30% of Canadian households, would equivalent into about 7 million. So there's far more unlicensed firearms owners in this country than there are the ones that comply. Okay, and those are Stats Can facts, and I mean those numbers were actually proven over and over and over again with when they went and looked at the importation records for firearms and how many firearms were in the long gun registry, all this stuff. But we do have an aging population, and I believe that there's a certain bracket of people. Not to say, because obviously not all people of the same age bracket share the same mindset, but for these people, hunting and firearms is just, it's nobody's gonna. Are you crazy? Like, they're not gonna ban guns in Canada. They're not gonna do this. They're not gonna. It's complacent, right? Like, it's the same thing that the Australians went through. Same things that we nearly went through in C-68. Nobody understood. I watched the gun community react and wake up and react to CZ, VZ, and Swiss Arms. And I mean, even with all of the networking, I mean, we have a vast network of people from coast to coast throughout the territories. I mean, we've got friends, contacts. I say to you, who Trevor Furlot is. You guys know who he is. He's in New Brunswick. I tell you who Rod Giltack is. You know him. He's in British Columbia. You see, we've built this incredible network. And that's something that we didn't have during C-68. But getting back to the reaction of the firearms community is very, very slow to react. These laws are so complex that they really, 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 it takes a lot of time for them to really dawn on you and say, oh my God, like, this is what's really happened. And I think that's legitimately, I think that the firearms community back in, let's say, 93, 91, 89, 86, whatever, were literally duped into believing that these laws were going to be constructed for the benefit of public safety. And gun owners bought into that idea. They bought into that ideology. Not all gunnies, obviously. That wasn't the case. But most people just complied because, they're not going to ban my guns.
Yeah, it's the Canadian thing to do. The police say do this, the government says do this, and we do it.
Dudley Do-Right, right? It's the Dudley Do-Right image, right?
It is.
Yeah. The Americans, we've got an RCMP as one of our national symbols. You go anywhere in the world, and they know they know that, they know the RCMP uniform. That's a symbol that they recognize of Canada, and that's just how it's always been. So when the RCMP say it's right and it's all good, and it's good. We just comply.
And it's sad, because people don't question, the validity or the justness of the directive coming from the top down. And now I know I hear you exactly. I've heard this. I mean, I was like 7 years old when they passed C-68. It was a long time ago. I was obviously not a gun owner. In fact, I probably made it to age 16 or 17 before I even knew you could own a gun in Canada. But that just reflects my upbringing. But now we have this vast network. We have the internet. It's in every home, and we all know each other, and we're able to disseminate information amongst everybody, all the people, the hardcore activists, and all of that. We have amazing potential to have our cause heard that didn't exist 20 years ago, which is, at least on the outset of it, like somewhat encouraging. But then at the same time, my gun-owning uncle thinks AR-15s ought to be banned, so there's that.
Yeah, well, I mean, but you got to remember, these guys, we can't, and as frustrating as that may sound, and I feel your pain, and I know the frustration, like I've said to many people, if I had that, even when I was with the NFA, if I had that magic switch where I could just flip that switch and turn all these guys into gun owners, like, it just seems like the simplest, or turn all these guys into gun activists. It's like, for people like us, it's just a simple thing. It's just something that we do. But for other people, they just want to be left alone. And they don't want to be involved. They don't want to be, they don't want their faces to be seen. They don't want to be heard. They don't want to be known. They just want to go about their business and be left alone. And, I think that, you made a really good point, Tyler, about, when you were at C-68, when I was in fact a gun owner, and I went to the Fed Up rallies, and I didn't know much about the laws at that time. I was much younger, and no, I don't think any of us really understood the complexity and how far-reaching these laws were. I mean, I protested at the City Hall in Actonville, Quebec by myself in the pouring rain. I mean, it's just, I knew enough about the law that I didn't want it, and it was, basically taking my FAC and turning me into a criminal. That I did know, and that was enough for me. So, but yeah, we have an incredibly well-developed network of gunnies. And we have the ability and the tools right now to reach out to people on levels that we were never, ever, ever be able to do before,
So, Shawn, do you think that's going to be the solution for the next political shift, the next time that I imagine it's going to be the Liberals try to ban something, or we see another reclassification that's made unilaterally by the RCMP? Do you think that Facebook and social media is going to be the way that the community
protests,
organizes, and gets itself together?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. There's the letter writing. People need direction, right? Like they're busy in their normal lives. They don't have time to sit down and write, a handwritten letter to a politician. Some gunnies, many gunnies will do it. Some people have the time to do it. Some people will just make the time to do it. But the majority of people, it's a lot easier for them if they have some type of guidance. So there's two things about how the success that we obviously got with the CZ and VZ. You had the grassroots movement that was driving the letter writing, the telephone calling, the emails, the pressure. But at the same time, you had gun orgs that were controlling the narrative. Now, there's a great, and I suggest this to every single gun activist, if you haven't read it, you need to read it. It's Confrontational Politics. And it's probably by far one of the best books in terms of how to craft effective messaging. And these people, they operate so far beyond the boundaries of a normal person's level of comprehension that nobody tends to challenge them, okay? Because this is how they control the narrative. They go way out on these limbs of, some of the messaging that they go through, and that's how they control the narrative. And quite frankly, the only way that I think successfully that there will be a coming together of people that are going to motivate themselves to do something, there's going to be that social media. Obviously, it's very, very strong, the networking possibilities of communication. But there really needs to be somebody out there crafting a blanket national message, similar to the "Don't Shoot Your Eye Out" kid, right? People, some of the old FUD people, I guess if you want to call them FUDs, they were like shocked. That was outrageous that the NFA would, craft such a message. But I'll tell you what, that message, that "Don't Shoot Your Eye Out" kid, gave us the opportunity because we had a plan to come out with the petitions for the AR-15, and we wanted to get those discussion. We wanted to get those talking points into the media where we're controlling the narrative. We shock and awe you with a message, and then you call me up for an interview, and then I get the chance to rationally and articulately explain to you why the AR-15 shouldn't be restricted. You understand? So there's an aspect of the grassroots part of it, but there's also an organizational crafting of the message that the messaging has to be shock and awe. And you have to shock them into giving you the media time to be able to get on there and articulate your message.
Makes sense.
Now you mentioned the FUDs, and I think that's the obvious one, is how do we bridge the gap between the group of guys who just have their shotgun and their deer rifle, and they are adamant saying they'll never ban my guns, and then the rest of us where we have the kind of the low-hanging fruit, the guns that it would be easy to convince the public that our property ought to be banned and seized. How do we bridge that gap? At my club, we've had some moderate successes, first and foremost by putting on our own shoots and generating a bit of money for the club. It's generated a bit of tolerance. It's gotten rid of a bit of the animosity for what we do. And without fail, the defensive pistol group at my club is there in force for every work party, whether it's fixing the berms or shoveling snow off the shooting bay roofs. So I do think cooperating with these guys to an extent, and getting out there and with smiling faces and shaking hands is a part of bridging that gap and creating that sense of community, so we know we're all in this together.
Yeah, well, I think it goes to speak too is to a lot of these gunners, for most of these guys, they were, I think it's like a lot. It has a lot to do with the rural-urban divide, right? Where the pump shotgun was just something that was in the milk house, and it's been in there for 40 years, and it's just something that they're accustomed to. Whereas now with modern sporting rifles, now you're exposing them to something that they're just oblivious to, right? Like they didn't see that on the farm, they didn't see that, in the woods, they didn't. So for them, it's like it's got to be scary because it's something that's unknown to them, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you bridge that gap? Well, I hate to be defeatist. I think the only way that we're going to bridge that gap, fellas, is if liberals, blindly or stupidly, ban semi-automatics. Like if they just ban semi-automatic actions or prohibit them in some shape, form, or fashion, that's when you're going to see the bridge gapped, or when you're going to see that bridge is going to be gapped, and there's going to be a massive uprising of people, right?
Yeah, but at that point, will it be too late?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, traditionally, the Liberal Party's been very good at just straight out ignoring gun owners, right? They did it during the Fed Up rallies, and they've proven that they are certainly no friends to the firearms owning community. So yes, it might be too little, too late at that point. You're absolutely right, but that's the tragedy. I did a video about some political action things that we could all do, and those things are good. But at the end of the day, they got 184 seats.
Yeah, there is definitely. I mean, the Liberals control the majority government right now, and there's nothing that we can do about that as an organization, as a community, or as individuals. That's pretty obvious. Liberals are just going to ignore us. That's been the thing that they've done traditionally. In terms of the 7 million households, or 7 million gun owners, 1/3 of Canadian households that own guns, or the 2 million that are on the books that have their pals or are pals, the only thing that I've been able to find to bridge that gap with I'm going to call them the older generation, because I'm of the I want the cool Call of Duty guns generation, is saying that they're going to ban semi-autos. And isn't your duck gun a semi-auto? Doesn't that hold 3 shells? Can't you get 3 birds all in a... Oh, it is. Well, they don't treat that as any differently than my semi-auto rifle or my semi-auto shotgun that we use for match shooting. Similarly to that, the argument that I've been making recently with a lot of hunters, a lot of other, again, I'll call them older gun owners, the audience that doesn't have the modern sporting rifles, the group that doesn't want to own AR-15s or TFORs, is, well, that looks like a sniper rifle. Your Remington 700 with a scope is a sniper rifle, isn't it? That's what the Liberals are going to say. That's what the next majority government that doesn't like guns is going to tell you. Because to them it looks the same way that the AR-15 looks like a black, scary assault rifle. So as soon as they ban sniper rifles, I mean, that will essentially outlaw all of your hunting firearms. And it's woken a few people up, but I don't think it's had the impact to wake up the majority of FUDs, hunters only.
I've tried to pursue that line of argument, and for the most part, I get nothing. These guys readily dismiss that as outrageous, and it is what it is. They're just thoroughly convinced that their guns are safe, and a lot of them just don't really care if somebody else's rights are being trampled. I mean, so I'm sorry to put it bluntly, but a lot of them just don't care. And it's sad to say, but I, to an overwhelming extent, without a doubt, the younger shooters I've met certainly and spoken with think black rifles and handguns are cool. And really, to put it bluntly, I don't think we need to worry about the divisiveness amongst gun owners in 20 years due to this. But we certainly do need to worry about being able to own anything more than muzzle loaders when we get there.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
You're absolutely right. And that goes back to say about the whole gamer generation, right? But what does that look like? How do you motivate those people? Well, a lot of these guys, you got to keep in mind, a lot of these folks aren't even licensed.
Yeah.
and truly they're not licensed, and so they're not affected by the legislation, right? Like they're just totally oblivious to it, right? You know that, and a lot of these guys, you know, a lot of these old boys, they've got prohib pistols that they've still got up in the attic, that you know that it was passed down to them, that you know, but they just don't know that it's been prohibited, and they don't know that there's been laws passed, and they don't know, you know, they had no back in, you know, C51 or was it C57, C52, C57. C52, 51. I don't know. It was one of those.
Came out in the 80s.
The one that came out in the 80s. C52. C52.
We'll call it C52, I think.
Yeah, I think it's C52. I can't remember now, but you know, they had no way of reaching to these people. They had no registry. They had a handgun registry, but I mean, a handgun registry was nothing more than a series of papers at your local police headquarters. So I mean, there was really no national way for them to reach out to people in those days, and a lot of those pistols, you know, went underground. You know, they just got thrown into a shoebox and thrown into the attic and forgot about. You know, we hear about it all the time, and during these gun, you know, hand-ins they did one in Hamilton. Got these beautiful, gorgeous prohib firearms that always seem to show up. They had a Sten gun the last time, I believe. You know, like people that have these firearms that have been long forgotten. So I don't know if it's even possible. You know, I don't want to seem defeatist, but I don't know if it's possible.
Well, and maybe it's not, Shawn. Maybe we can't reach all 7 million gun owners in Canada. Maybe we have to focus on the 2 million that have pals that are of that bracket, of the demographic where they might be on Facebook, or they might listen to podcasts, or we might have some other way to engage them in social media.
Do you know how many people are involved with the Coalition for Gun Control?
You know what? I looked at it the other day. I think it was listed as 5,000 and change on the Facebook page when I looked on the weekend.
Yeah, those don't base your opinion off that. There are about 8 people.
Yeah, that are actively involved. Those are your volunteers and your organizers. Absolutely.
8 people. They manage skillfully to control the narrative.
You can get a lot done when the governing party pays you money to lobby them.
Yeah, fair enough.
And you have the sympathetic ear of the media.
Oh, absolutely. Well, but I think that with I'm of the opinion, guys, that a smaller, nimble, well-organized, you know, well-versed on the messaging, highly committed individuals. I believe that with a small force like that, I mean, I saw what we achieved with the NFA with the numbers that we had, and quite frankly, it was, you know, unbelievable to think that number of people could get legislative change for so many Canadians. But I believe highly coordinated, well-networked, well-versed on the messaging, like I say, can achieve a lot in the political landscape.
I agree. You know, I'm optimistic with the quality of people in our circles. I mean, we have the facts on our side, certainly. We have, you know, the principles of freedom and justice on our side. It seems like we have everything going for us, except nobody wants to listen to us.
That was actually just going to be my rebuttal to that, Tyler, was we're right. We have the facts, and I mean, we're legally entitled to own these things under the current legislation, but the CBC doesn't give us any airtime. We're not the ones that are making the news. And in fact, I think the mainstream media is doing just about everything it can to ignore us.
Absolutely.
Well, that's why that's where the need for a very coherent, bold, and brave national association does the messaging like we had started to do with the NFA, with the Don't Shoot Your Eye Out Kid, with the No Compromise, with the Big Freaking Gun Giveaway. You know, things that were they found so absolutely, you know, outrageously extreme that they had to talk to us. And then once you get that opportunity, you know, you're doing live radio, you're doing live television, you're doing interviews, you come across the people as, you know, articulate, polite, you know, well-versed, educated.
So a normal Canadian.
Like just like a normal Canadian. This is somebody that I know, I'm your neighbor. And and so, and I'm not talking about me specifically. I'm just saying we as a community, we're just like anybody else's neighbor. So, but you need to have like I say, there's that grassroots, and then there's that kind of the responsibility of a national org that would really, you know, kind of push the envelope in terms of messaging to get that media time, to get those spokespeople the opportunity to address the Canadian public. It's a war on two fronts, really, the hearts and minds, right? there's a long-term, short-term. There's short-term goals, medium-term, and long-term goals. And the long-term goals, obviously, you want to educate the public. And there's organizations out there that are specifically orienting their direction towards educating the public about firearms issues, and its ownership and use. But I think there's, when we talk about the different orgs that are out there and people are, complaining about one or the other, or, I think that I think it's just a good thing that you have a number of different organizations with different mandates and different messaging, right?
Well, actually, I wanted to ask a question about that, because it's come up recently. I've been asked a couple of times, and I'm not really sure what the right answer is. Maybe you'd all like to weigh in on it. Would we be better off with the 800-pound gorilla in the room, a la the NRA in the U.S., or are we better off with smaller organizations that are more focused on a particular goal, like educating the public or educating politicians or doing media outreach or whatever that niche is they're focused on? What's the better solution for the Canadian gun owner? Do we want?
Well, I think, if we look to the United States and the debate down there, the NRA is certainly one of the most well-known, but in my personal opinion, and this isn't taking anything away from NRA members or the organization itself, I don't find them nearly as effective as a smaller group called the Second Amendment Foundation, which actually the recognition of the Second Amendment as it stands now stemmed from the Heller decision that the Second Amendment brought that fight, and they're a much smaller, more nimble organization. They have a very legal and legislative pointed agenda, and they pursue in the courts to modify, change, or recognize certain U.S. legislation, whereas the NRA is more of a blanket group that is more involved in, more in training and sponsorships and things of that nature. So they're very, very different. Their focuses are very, very different. So I think that first and foremost, the NRA cannot come up here. Okay?
No, absolutely, and the NRA can't come up here. They have their bylaws to prevent that, and I think it would look badly on the Canadian firearms community if we were to be seen as being in bed with the NRA. But
and they're not that radical. I mean, the NRA.
No, I realize that, and you realize that, but the non-gun-owning public at large, I think.
Oh yeah, they hear that.
Doesn't see it that way, and I think that's. I mean, to the NRA's credit, in the U.S., they're the ones that make the media stories, not Alan Gottlieb and the Second Amendment Foundation.
No, you're absolutely right, but Alan Gottlieb and the Second Amendment Foundation are responsible for the largest decision affecting the whole.
Absolutely, with the Heller case, certainly.
Right. So,
which way do we go in Canada? Do we get a big group that has a lot of media coverage? Do we have smaller groups that target those particular niches where they excel?
Yeah, I think that each organization kind of has to find its own niche and its own demographic and what they particularly think will be successful. But I certainly do think that, depending on the, I suppose, the direction of these organizations, what they decide to take, knowing what I know about the three of them now, the directions are pretty different in terms of the ideologies that are driving them. So they each have their own mission. And, I can't see it as a bad thing. You got to remember, the gun activism game in Canada is relatively small. I don't know how many NFA members were actually CSSA members and vice versa, but I would go on a limb and say probably as high as 50-60%.
I'd imagine you're right. It's probably a very large majority because it's the same.
They're overlapping members, right?
Exactly. It's the people that are involved, and they tend to be involved heavily if they are at all.
Right. Yeah, I held a dual membership until about a year before last spring, where I let my CSSA membership lapse. Now I'm certainly considered rejoining because, Shawn, since you're out of your position at the NFA, the direction no longer appeals to me. When you were on board, I was buying the no compromise swag left, right, and center. I was pushing it on all my friends. I was getting all of the people around me kind of whipped up into the activist mindset. And now it just seems like it's run out of steam. There's no direction. Everybody hates the guy in charge. And, that's kind of the state of affairs, and it's quite sad. Now, that being said, with the discussion on the NRA, I think to a large extent Canadians define being Canadian as being not American. And I think that the NRA, even amongst gun owners in Canada, would never really be something you could sell to them.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. Yeah, no, and those are animosities that have, and I think a lot of this has to do with the First and Second World War. Canadians made unbelievable sacrifices, certainly during the First War, and they came home, and these guys didn't want anything to do with firearms, right? And we're a relatively small population that sent a heck of a lot of people over there, right? So there's the Canadian mindset of be humble, be good to your neighbor, don't make too many waves, go along to get along kind of thing. Whereas our cousins to the south are a little bit more audacious. So I agree with you, Tyler, that I don't think the NRA would be saleable here anyway.
Yep.
All right, Jeff, do you have anything to add? You've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, and I don't know if I agree with Shawn. I don't know if we wouldn't be stronger having one solid, united lobby group that would represent all of us. And maybe Shawn is correct. Maybe it wouldn't be possible. I don't know. It's an interesting topic. One that maybe an entire show could be devoted to.
Well, and not to take away anything from the people that are running these organizations. I certainly reached out. I'm not going to mention any names, but I certainly reached out on many occasions to people in the other organizations, and it didn't necessarily go the way I'd hoped it would have gone on any of the occasions that I've reached out to those other gun organizations. There seems to be it's because here's our problem. Our problem is that we do indeed have a right to keep and bear arms. It's an English common law. It's an ancient law right back to the Magna Carta, out through the British North America Act. We have a codified right to have and keep firearms. Okay. The problem with that is with the Pierre Trudeau years and all of that, it had become diluted and is no longer recognized as a right, but has never been repealed in the Supreme Court of Canada. Okay. But the problem is that we don't have that common rallying point that the Americans do. Right? So in the United States, everybody rallies, all these different Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundation, NRA, like all these groups, the state rifle associations, like all these different groups, their common rallying point is the Second Amendment. Okay? We have a set of criminal codes that criminalize the peaceful, unlicensed possession of a firearm. Okay? So the perception is not quite the same. And I think that it attracts a certain personality of person. And again, I don't want to take anything away from anybody that's there in any of these organizations. But I think that everybody wants to be that guy that saves or decriminalizes 2 million people, right? And so I think that the nature of our laws. Look, you've got an organization that doesn't advocate for carrying pistols for self-defense. You've got another organization that does. The other organization does as well. You've got another organization that advocates for licensing. You've got one in between that doesn't advocate for licensing. So the criminal code is so horrible in the sense that trying to create something common out of a terrible set of laws is extremely difficult, right? Because everybody wants to pick that piece out of the criminal code which they think would relieve the firearms owning community the most, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's true of any group of activists. Is they all want to be the one that sticks it to the man and saves everyone else. And I don't think that's unique amongst the gun activist community. But I do think you're right, Shawn, that seems to be the problem, is that everyone thinks that their solution is the solution, the only solution.
The problem, really, is right here. No, but let's be honest here, guys. If the four of us sat down and put this book between us, and we all said, each person go through and pick out 3 things that you would immediately lobby for and get rid of, how much do you want to bet we wouldn't be able to agree on what we pick out?
No, absolutely. The Firearms Act is a it's a cruel, cruel joke that's been perpetrated on us.
Yep. And I mean, I think that's the real, crux of this whole thing and this whole debate, and just the organizations in general. That's the crux of it's really our Achilles tendon. I mean, it's our weakness, because we're facing off against laws that we, first and foremost, we can't agree amongst ourselves which laws we need to get rid of first. And then how do you go about lobbying to get those laws changed when you can't even agree on which laws you want to go after in the first place? Right? So it's I think in a best case scenario, we would have one very large, very aggressive organization. But then again, you've got people that, like Tyler mentioned earlier, the occasional skeet shooter, that's more of a, I don't know, he's not interested in, holstered gun.
And he's totally okay with the PAL system. He doesn't really see it as the criminalization of, private property possession. He doesn't see it that way, and he never will. And you might never be able to bring him on side in reverting things back to at least, a certification system where your private property is your private property.
Yeah, well, you open an excellent question, raise an excellent point there, Tyler. You guys got to remember that you've got wildlife organizations out there that are part of this scheme. Okay, their organizations exist because of the money they make from licensing.
Yeah.
Okay, so any chance that some of these wildlife federations get to throw black gunners under the bus or to throw pistol shooters under the bus, they'll do it at every opportunity they can get. They don't want. I remember when I don't know what exactly it was about. I wanted to congratulate Minister Blaney on something, and I reached out to every single wildlife organization in the country to craft a collective message, congratulating the minister on, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but I wanted to put a collective message together. None of them responded. Not a single one of them responded to me, and I was in official capacity of the NFA at that point. So it just goes to show that, the FEDCP in Quebec, they're making lots of money off of licensing courses. The Quebec Shooters Federation, this is the guy that said that he didn't care if that in his mind nobody needed anything bigger than a 22 pistol. This is the guy he's the president of the Quebec Shooting Federation. They're giving Law 9 courses, and they're giving restricted courses. Right? These guys are making a lot of money off of this stuff. And these are big organizations, guys, make no mistake. You got the OFAH that has, 75,000 members?
I am unfortunately one of those members because of the way that their insurance program works at one of the gun clubs to which I'm a member.
Yep, I'm a member there too. Twofold, I had to be a member there because of their insurance in order to hunt Grand River Conservation Authority land a few years back when I was still in school, and then now through my club I'm still a member.
Well, and I don't want to take anything away from the good works that they do, because they certainly do some good work. All things measurable, I suppose. But
no, I don't disagree with you, Shawn. I just, in my opinion, if I could choose who to give my money to, that I would support their form of activism. It wouldn't be the group that doesn't want me to be a part of it.
Well, guys, and this is total. I'm being totally pragmatic. It's human nature. What they did in C68 was they wanted to calm the gun owning community, so they didn't have an armed uprising on their hands. It's literally, when we did the Fed Up rallies in Ottawa, there were snipers on the roofs. I mean, that's not tinfoil hat. That's a matter of fact. It's widely known now. They've done many access to information requests. There were snipers on the roof with their scopes, beaded down on law-abiding gun owners that were protesting C68. Now, to quell that, the Liberals went out and they bought support. They gave licensing. They gave the licensing as the responsibility. I mean, this is what they do. This is how the left works. They ask for it all, and then they'll compromise and they'll scale back. Like, this is how they operate. So they basically bought off all of the different federations with licensing. One big scheme. And they're getting paid for it.
Definitely.
These guys have created jobs. They've created nice retirement funds. I'm sure that some of these executive guys are making some big numbers. You know, it's human nature, I suppose.
And I've always told people that groups like the OFAH, you know, they're conservation and hunting organizations. They are not gun rights organizations. There's a clear line there. And this was back, you know, a year and change ago when you were still involved with the NFA, Shawn, when I was pushing NFA membership, because I would constantly get from people, oh, I'm already a member of OFA. And I kept telling them that's not good enough. You know, these people will throw you under the bus. You think your handguns matter to them? They've already given up handgun hunting. They don't care about that.
Yeah, well, any organization in my mind that would invite, Chris Wyatt to their annual general meeting to do a speech.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just mind blowing. I mean, and listening to his speech was even worse. It just hurt my brain. But
and he was muttering under his breath about transporting handguns in your glove boxes is ridiculous.
Yeah. So when you invite a guy like that to do a speech at your annual general meeting, and he was actually getting applause, it bewildered me. I was truly just totally and utterly bewildered by that whole why they would invite him there. But I mean, it goes to show that these organizations, they support licensing. And they support the scheme behind it because it generates money for their organizations, right?
Absolutely.
So an uphill battle. I mean, that's really the issue. And you know, some of the provincial legislation around hunting enables them to put restrictions, like you say. If I wanted to hunt on a certain piece of land, I have to have my OFAH membership. You know, it's, you know, here you want to hunt a turkey, you got to go through the FedECP. You want to get your hunter certification course, you got to go through them. And they're given the gun course at the same time. You know, it's
a sigh, I think, pretty much sums that up, Shawn. That is.
Well, it's perpetual, right? I mean,
it is.
It's a perpetual fight, and so long as so long as that you've got, you know, sympathizers that are factions or big organizations, well-organized organizations that continue to support, you know, these types of schemes, it's going to be very, very difficult to get anything really meaningful. Now, not to say, I come back to my small, well-organized group of activists that could be considered almost radical. Those people tend to get things done. Because the politicians, they understand two things. This is the thing. You got to remember, I can have 100,000 members on paper, okay? But who's giving the donations? Who's buying the no compromise product? Who's buying the membership? Who's actively calling their MP? A very small group of core members of a certain organization that those are the guys that are doing the heavy lifting for everybody else. And it can be effective. It can certainly be effective. So I'm not completely discouraged by that, but you know, like I say, I to get back to Jeff's concern about 3 orgs. You know, maybe he's right. I don't know. I don't have, you know, the answer. I can only speak from my own personal experience, right?
Absolutely. So I think we'll wrap up the topic segment of the show. Again, that was how we're going to go about uniting all Canadian gun owners, and I don't think that we've come up with a solid plan, but I think we've got a couple of good ideas. We're going to have our grassroots organizations and then the larger messaging coming down from the orgs that are good at that political message and getting our MPs and our government involved. Does anyone have any final comments?
On that topic, all I can say is we have a 4-year window now where we're going to be under attack, so we better figure something out quick.
Oh yeah, well, and I can speak to that too, Tyler. I said in my video, I believe it was just my video yesterday or the day before, these gun organizations, they need to get their shit together, and I mean quick. We need to launch a preemptive strike, a collective preemptive strike on these liberals. They need to feel the pinch of having to reply to thousands and thousands of letters, phone calls, showing up at their riding offices. Like, this needs to happen now. The time to do that is not when the legislation is going to be on the table. That's going to be too late. They're gonna screw us out of the committees. They'll screw up. Like, we're not even going to get a chance in any of that. Okay?
No, once the legislation is tabled, they'll have to put it through just to save face. They won't quit once it's on the table.
Yeah, once those gears are turning, they'll bring in a group like the OFAH, they'll bring in a group like the FEDCP, and they'll figure out some new way of giving them some type of new carrot, I suppose, to get them to sit around those Senate hearing tables and sing the tune for the Liberal Party, right? That's what I foresee. So I think that the organizations now really need to get it together, get it in gear, and I don't know. I know what they're facing in terms of communication amongst themselves. It's highly unfortunate. I think it's tragic, and we're all ultimately going to pay the price. But one individual, guys, can achieve a lot. Despite not having maybe one org helping them, I think one person, one highly committed person or people can certainly, with all of our resources that we can muster, we can certainly craft a message that would certainly, in the least, get the messaging out there. But something needs to be crafted. Now, I don't know if the right answer is massive petitions, letter writing campaigns, whatever that looks like. I don't have the answer to that. I have my own ideas, but yeah, no, we have to be proactive rather than reactive, I think.
Absolutely, I agree.
All right. The next thing that we're going to do is rapid fire listener feedback, because we have so many people listening to us on YouTube this evening. Andre P650, hi. Hi, right back at you. We've got the Christian Rifle Club. Greetings from Edmonton, Alberta. Well, have fun in NDP territory, my friend. We've got Velmet762. Greetings from deep behind enemy lines in Ontario. Well, we're probably neighbors. So I feel you. We are deep behind enemy lines, at least in my riding.
Why live on the other side of the wall?
Oh dear. I'm not even a Master FFC. How do we feel about Justin Trudeau? Well, we won't say anything bad about Justin Trudeau, but we certainly don't agree with his, or at least I can't speak for everyone else on the panel, but I certainly don't agree with his party's politics.
I don't care for the guy.
He should stick to snowboarding.
And CJ, we need a marketing plan, and I agree with you, and hopefully we'll figure out what that's going to look like. For the time being, I think it's grassroots organization, and hopefully finding an organization that you can support financially, or at least that you're on the same page as politically.
I think that people have to go through their platforms, just like you'd pick a political party. Go through their platforms, and if you agree with and there's lots of information on their websites. Go on there and have a look, and if you agree with what's there, and it's something that you can get behind, and you can fight for, and you can donate to, then do that.
Absolutely. I think that's the two things that are going to make a difference at the organizational level. Is if it's a group that you agree with enough that you can give them money, and also that you can do whatever it is that their agenda requires of you, whether that's letter writing or visiting your MP or whatever that particular brand of activism looks like for them.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to do before we close out this evening's show?
Does anybody have any questions out on YouTube? Does anybody like to ask some questions? Or
how we feel about Justin Trudeau is a popular topic. I think that we've adequately covered how we feel about the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister designate.
I think he's a joke.
Well, that makes me laugh.
I think Gavin McInnes pretty much summed up how I feel about the guy.
Yeah, he did. He did a great job with that.
That was well done. Yeah. I was a little saddened to see Ron Paul's post on him.
Oh yeah, I saw those too.
Yeah.
Sorry, last three comments just came in. George, non-compliance, we need to stand together. I agree with you 100%. Non-compliance this time around, I think because we're a more socially involved community than we were 20 years ago, I think that actually will happen this time around.
I second that 100%. No compliance.
No compliance, absolutely. Hi from Miramichi. Sorry to hear you're in Miramichi. Say hi to the firearms programs folks for us. And hello from the Iron Curtain in Newfoundland. Well, not really sure why there's an Iron Curtain in Newfoundland, but That's it for the YouTube stuff.
We're such a vast country, that it's like how it really blows my mind how we've been I don't know it's almost we've been indoctrinated into, and there are really good gunny people across this country, coast to coast, all the way up through the territories, that believe all the same things that we're talking about here today. And it's just, I find it tragic that you've got such a wonderful community with great instilled values, a great set of values, and we just can't get our shit together enough to be able to collectively form a formidable fighting force. And when I say fighting force, obviously non-violent fighting force, but a political activism group that really, I don't know somebody out on Facebook said it the other day. Could you imagine if every single restricted firearms owner in Canada was the member of a gun organization? That would be like 790,000 people, almost 1 million people. We would be able to take over all 3 political parties and have the gun laws of our choosing.
Wouldn't that be the dream?
And it's in this country. It seems like a pipe dream, but it is in our political system. It's absolutely possible.
Yeah, but I think you have to remember, Shawn, a lot of the gun owners in this country do not have the passion for firearms that maybe the 4 of us have. To them, it's just something that my grandfather had, and I use it to kill the odd deer. Whereas we may put a bit more emphasis on the freedom that goes hand in hand with owning the firearm and what it symbolizes and the political freedoms involved therein.
Yep.
In the aftermath of the 858 and the Swiss Arms Prohibition, I watched the NFA Facebook fan number go up by the dozens and the hundreds, by the minute and hour. And, these were people that were like kind of caught with their pants down, thinking that their government would never do that to them. And, it ended up being several thousand people. And those were the people that even bothered to go on Facebook. And I think, Shawn's right. I mean, if we could harness these people who actually care about this type of thing, then yeah, you could totally hijack any party and dramatically influence policy. And that might be the way out of this mess.
Well, I've said this before, and if I had, and I say me, I mean, if we had, how many ridings are there in Canada? 390. 398 or
338.
338 ridings?
Yeah.
Okay, so 338 ridings. If we had 10 hardcore committed people in each one of those ridings that would go into their electoral district riding associations, whether it be Liberal, NDP, or otherwise, in wolf in sheep's clothing. You don't tell them you're pro-gun if you're going to the NDP party, okay? You keep it quiet. You move through the ranks quietly, and you quietly go about your business, just like the left has done to the Conservative Party. They've infiltrated. They've within the Conservative Party have continually pulled the Conservative Party left. More promises, more extravagant spending, more social spending, more and more and more. This is what they've done. They've achieved their goal brilliantly, and we can do the same if we had, like I say, highly committed people that would get involved in their electoral district associations, take leadership roles in those electoral district associations, where they're in a position where they're actually choosing the candidate. We literally, with a very, very, very small, highly committed force, could literally overtake Parliament.
That's interesting, and I think we should talk about that in a future episode.
I agree. I think that is a good topic for discussion.
Yeah.
All right, I guess we'll wrap up the show. That sounds like a good note to end on, at least a positive note to end on. Shawn, if people wanted to stay in touch with you or find out more about what you're currently doing, where's the best place to get in touch with you?
Well, they can reach out to me on my Facebook page, obviously. I think I've got 2,000, almost, I don't know how many thousands of friends I got in there now, so I accept everybody. I'm just one of those stupid people I just blindly accept everybody. Just add me on Facebook, or you can email me, Shawn.Bevins, my name, obviously, at spathatactical.com. Reach out to me there. I'm on Twitter as well. You can find me there, Shawn Bevins. Yeah, you can look up my business phone number and give me a call on the phone if you'd like.
All right, you heard him. Everybody call Shawn at work. And
not at this time of night, please.
Funny thing is, he works from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Yeah, oh yeah, you noticed.
Tyler, where can everybody get a hold of you?
You can obviously reach me on Facebook. I do a podcast. I try and put an episode out every 2 weeks. International Liberty Death Podcast. You can find us on. You can reach me through our Facebook page there. Best way to reach me is through my own personal Facebook, Tyler Gerard. I'm not hiding. That's my name, and I like Shawn. I accept everybody. I got nothing to hide, and I welcome any criticism. All the haters, bring them on. I don't care.
Me too.
Anybody local to me. I wouldn't hesitate to meet any gun owner or anybody curious about what I do at the local Tim Hortons for a coffee. Just don't hesitate to drop me a line.
Jeff, do you have a public-facing personality that you'd like to share?
Well, probably the most public one would be on Canadian Gun Nuts, and that would be as Mississauga Gun Nut, and anybody that wants to get in touch with me can do so there with a PM.
Fantastic. I'm, of course, Andrew. You can get to me by emailing the show, Andrew at Canadian Patriot Podcast. Hit us up on feedback at Canadian Patriot Podcast, and I can get that out to the individual panelists. You can also get to us on by submitting a feedback at CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback. For me, you can get a hold of my work at everydaytactical.com. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at edtactical. I'd like to thank Shawn, Tyler, Jeff, all of you for being on the panel this evening. This has been a fantastic first episode, in my opinion, and not the train wreck that I was expecting. Slightly different train wreck, not the one I was expecting.
Well, thanks for putting this on once again, Andrew.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate you putting this together. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. It was great, guys. It's finally nice to actually have voice-to-voice with you, and you did a great job. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for being on. To our listeners, I'd like to remind you all at this time to remember, you are the true North, strong and free. Tuning in next week, Monday night at 9 p.m. Thank you.